be about developing and maintaining scholarship programs for refugees and asylum seekers. So to begin with, I mean, I know quite a lot of you already, and I won't kind of labour the points you might already know, but we have got some faces who I think we've not been in touch with before, which is really exciting, and we're pleased to be working with you and hopefully supporting you in developing or improving scholarships that already exist at various universities. Just by way of introduction, Student Action for Refugees is a national charity of students. We've got 34,000 kind of students involved in our movement. There are over 33 different towns and cities at 50 different universities. They volunteer at local projects, so that's let's say a refugee football club, an English language or homework club, these sort of projects. They campaign to improve the lives of refugees, and that might be through parliamentary campaigning, it might be through campaigning on campus for scholarships, it might be through kind of international campaign work as well. And they also educate on campus about refugees and asylum and the kind of issues that are hopefully things we really want to foster as a movement. So that's just a rough kind of idea of what STAR is and does. What I do at STAR is run the Equal Access campaign, which has been going for 10 years now. And we campaign to improve access to higher education for refugees and asylum seekers in the UK. And we do this in various different ways. So we have 4 key strands where we work with universities and partners, as we're doing today, to help develop and improve programs. We work with students and refugee activists to increase campaigning and awareness for scholarships, to try and kind of lobby for the support and campaign at a grassroots level. And then we also advertise programs. We try and help with recruitment, and we also teach on several access courses to try and help refugees access the information they need to be able to find scholarships. And we also advocate for policy change through a network of kind of policy forum that we run. And we do that in the UK and also look more globally as well. So that's a rough idea of what we do and where we come from. And the Equal Access campaign has 3 kind of key asks. We want universities to classify all those seeking asylum as home students for these purposes, just to make sure that everyone is kind of clear and kind of coming from the same point, that we don't believe people seeking asylum are international students. We want universities to offer scholarships that cover study and maintenance costs for people who have come to the UK seeking refugee protection, and then also develop access pathways to support them to get to those scholarships. And we want people to publicise these policies so that potential students can apply. So we try and support universities to do this as part of our work. I'm just going to check that there's no, I can see the chat function is active. Is there a problem with my, are people hearing me okay?
It's just going a little bit slow sometimes. So I was just wondering, I don't know if other people are, I was just wondering, because I suppose you maybe without your camera for the presentation might help.
Yeah, I'll stop showing video and we'll see how that goes. Yeah. Okay, how's that doing? Is that better? I'll take that as a yes.
I can still see your video, but
oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So that goes over what we're doing. So I think what I'm going to start with is just kind of going over the barriers, so everyone's kind of got a rough idea. I won't spend too long in this section because I know many people here have a lot of experience in this field already, so I don't want to kind of tell people what they already know. But obviously in the UK there are some really major barriers that prevent access to higher education for people seeking refugee protection. And key groups we'll be talking about today are people who might be seeking asylum, so people who have yet to get status, people who have refugee status already, people who have humanitarian protection status, and people who have limited or discretionary leave, and whether that might be a result of an asylum claim or similar. So there's some areas of barriers that we can look at here, and these include financial barriers, so a key one being access to student finance, which obviously scholarships attempt to redress. Issues around IELTS course tests and fees, UCAS fees are also things to consider, funding to support preparing for applications, funding on course, and of course, quite a major one is the limitations of asylum support, which I'm sure many people know in the UK are currently, or usually at least, I'm not sure, it may have been increased recently because of the current crisis, but usually around £37.75 a week. There's also barriers beyond finance, which are really important to consider here. And so we look at structural barriers. We can think about negotiating the asylum system itself, which is obviously highly complex and can be very stressful. We can look at the potential restrictions of the asylum system to access study, and by that we mean things like that actually mean students can be restricted from study whilst on courses, and other kind of legal pitfalls that people can fall into around the asylum process and education. The recognition of qualifications can be a real problem for some people who may have left proof of their academic history behind. when they left their country for whatever reason, and also English language requirements, which can be very difficult to kind of get around. There's little flexibility for many people on those, and that can be quite a big problem. There's also kind of contextual barriers which I think are important to consider, and these are things which also apply to widening participation target groups in other areas in the UK, and these might include things about being confident in applying, actually having access to the information about the opportunities they have, understanding whether they are eligible for finance or not, and understanding the UK application system as well, which seems quite natural to many of us who live and work in it, but obviously for some people coming here it can be quite complicated. So to begin with, we're going to look at kind of fee statuses, who can access asylum, who can access student finance and who can not. And just as we will send this PowerPoint around afterwards, so don't worry if you can't catch anything now or you're trying to take notes, we'll send it around. This table hopefully gives you a rough idea. I'm not going to go through every single status because I think I would rather that you went to UKISA's website, which I've linked down below, because they have the most up-to-date, the most detailed, the most helpful website for who can access student finance in what region of the UK, and who cannot. So I think I would definitely urge you also use UKISA's website to understand that, but this table is kind of illustrative for that. You'll notice, well, I'll give you a broad overview first in the sense that if you have refugee status, in most cases you'll be able to access student finance, and you're classified as a home student. You're also allowed to work to support your studies. If you have humanitarian protection status, you're allowed to work. I've included this cross out here because recently this has changed. And so now I think as universities individually will be asked to apply this ruling, which is like within the last month come through, but essentially humanitarian protection status should now be entitled to student finance and home fees in the same way that a refugee student should in England. Now this is something that's still filtering through the Department for Education and Student Finance. And if I think people want an update on that, you should see the update I've included here, which is on the UKISA website. And as I say, we'll share this around afterwards. That's something to be aware of, is that this area has very recently changed. If you're still seeking asylum in England, at least, you have no access to student finance. You're classified as an international student and you cannot work, which effectively means you're unable to study unless you have access to international fees, which most asylum seekers obviously won't. There's also, around discretionary leave to remain, there's also some restrictions. In most cases, you're delayed to be able to access finance until you've lived in the country for 3 years of ordinary residence, and that generally has to be an extended period of time. Again, I'm not going to go through everything in every region, because I think the best place to go for this information is UKISA's website, which will keep pointing everyone towards. It's a really useful tool, and yeah, they're very good at keeping you up to date as well, so do look at their updates too. There are, of course, other financial barriers, as I've mentioned, for people trying to access student finance, and people looking to go to university from refugee backgrounds, and these include IELTS course tests or other English language tests as well. UCAS fees, and in some cases, application costs at postgraduate level can be a problem. Funding to support their preparations for applying to university, and that might include, being able to access mobile data, being able to access data for their laptop or whatever, because obviously a lot of asylum accommodation doesn't include Wi-Fi or any kind of internet access. Support on course can be an issue, asylum support, as we mentioned before. And I think something to remember as well in this area is that this is a really shifting legal landscape. So you can see here there's been a recent revision around no study conditions, which has, like, in some way improved the ability of individuals to be allowed to study. But again, I'm not going to go into the details of each of these cases, but I think it's important to just remember that this area of law is both complex and it's also not necessarily coherent either. And it's subject to quite a lot of change. So for example, humanitarian protection status has changed twice in the last year in England, and it's just something to be aware of, that it's worth keeping up to date as best you can with that. So there's other possible non-financial barriers, and I include possible here because I think it's really important to remember that there is no single refugee experience. Everyone's path to seeking asylum is different, and some people might experience these difficulties, others might not at all. But it's just worth considering that as well as the barriers that we talk about in terms of finance, in terms of qualification recognition, there's also a lot more personal barriers that people might face and that may not be immediately visible, that are worth considering. So hopefully this is just grounding the discussion, and then we'll kind of move on to scholarships very shortly. Of course, the asylum system itself should get a mention in what can be a very difficult process. Again, you can see from this that it's a complicated system. People are often in the asylum system for a very, very long time. It's not unusual for people who have, been in the system for about 5 years or longer. It's definitely something we get with regular inquiries. And so I think it's something to remember that, your students will be having to deal with all of this on top of their exams, on top of their studies, their homework, they're kind of trying to socialize with friends. And so it's just something to remember in all of that too. So the solution which we've tried to come up with, short of actually getting a legal and kind of political change, which is obviously a longer term goal, is scholarships. And this has been a fantastic response from the UK sector. I think there's no other country which has such a kind of breadth of scholarships that have been voluntarily created by universities to support individuals. And I think it says a lot about the higher education sector that the UK has 75 scholarship programs, at least, maybe more now, I think. And we have collected all of those on our website to kind of discuss how they work and help advertise the programs for individuals who are looking to take up those places. So I'm going to stop talking a little bit, and we're going to go to some good practice examples of scholarships, so they can talk a little bit about how they run their programs, about how the kind of they might adapt their programs to different areas. So I'm going to pass you over initially to Cardiff Met with Natalie Buckland, and then over to Isabel at Birkbeck as well. So I will pass you over. Natalie, are you okay to start?
Yeah, fine.
Fantastic, great.
Hi everyone. So as Chris said, I'm Natalie Buckland from Cardiff Metropolitan University, and I was responsible for setting up the Sanctuary Award, as we call it, scholarships for initially asylum seekers. And so if you could go to the next slide, please. This first started for Cardiff Met with students from our own Star Society who approached the Students' Union, approached the International Office. I work at the International Office, by the way, I should have said that, to tell us about the STAR system and the existence of scholarships in other universities, and asked why we weren't doing the same thing. So they had a chat with us and the Students' Union, and we at the time had a brand new Vice Chancellor and senior management team. And for us, and I've heard very different from other universities, for us it was actually quite easy to get support from senior management. They were very keen to listen and to support us with setting up some type of scholarship, and it was approved quite quickly. So it was a bit of a rush job to get the first scholarships out in the first instance, but we managed to get an agreement for 2 postgraduate scholarships in 2017. And then myself spoke further then to the senior management team, finance department, etc., to try and ask whether we could have any additional ones, because we were getting quite a number of inquiries from students who were interested in undergraduate level study as well. And in 2019, we were permitted to have an extra 2 undergraduate level scholarships to join the postgraduate ones. So from 2019, we could offer 4. When we first started with the scholarships, as I said, it was a bit of a rush job, and it was a lot to get my head around initially, myself and a small team that were working on this. And initially we aimed the scholarship at just asylum seekers, seeing that they appeared to be the most needy of people seeking sanctuary in the UK. But the more that we learned about sanctuary seekers, we spoke to the likes of Chris at STAR and Article 26, we decided to actually open it out a bit further for other categories of leave that students had, or leave that they don't have, to be able to include them as well, because some of their circumstances met a lot of the criteria that we were looking for a student to join our university. Our criteria at the moment is that the applicants must already have a Cardiff Met offer. So this is, we must have a course that suits you. You must be suitable for a course at the university in the first instance. So the students, the applicants would apply for a course, and if they get an offer, whether that's an unconditional offer or conditional offer, that's fine, but they must have an offer for a particular course. They then need a complete application for the Sanctuary Award, and a reference from an academic or somebody in a community group that they're working with at the moment. And we ask for some type of evidence of their current status as well, their current situation, whether that's Home Office documents or a biometric card, whatever the situation might be. Can you switch screens, please? Okay, so our scholarship includes a full tuition fee waiver. We have tried to steer away from providing any type of bursary or monetary award in the fear that we may affect the benefits of the individuals who are who are receiving the scholarship. We wouldn't want to affect anything, so we've tried to steer away from that, and we're just providing alternatives. So the first is a tuition fee waiver, so the successful applicants do not have to pay any tuition fees for the course. So that was for the postgraduate course or the undergraduate course for the 3 years. They would get a university bus pass. So we have a local university bus pass that students can usually purchase, but this would be a free bus pass which allows them to commute within Cardiff and just outside of Cardiff as well into Newport. So that's the transport issue then is resolved, the transport costs. A weekly meal allowance, so each enrolled student would have a student card, and we put money onto the card for them to purchase meals on campus during the week. And also we meet with the individuals on their entry into the university and allocate them a specific person to be able to meet with, and a direct line to somebody who would be able to support them with any concerns they might have, and maybe have a bit of an understanding of the type of background the person's come from. Next slide. Thank you. So far to date, we've had 8 scholarships granted in total, 7 of them postgraduate, 1 undergraduate, and that was just because of the mix that we had applications. We only had 1 undergraduate application that was suitable on our first offering. 3 of them have graduated so far, and 2 of them we're so impressed that we've had 2 of them who've actually graduated with first class honours. They were completely dedicated, amazing students, and so grateful for the opportunity. 1 unfortunately has been returned home due to failed asylum application, however she is continuing with her dissertation from home and will still hopefully achieve her qualification. And I've just put up a couple of quotes there that we've had from our recipients of the Sanctuary Award, so you can see that it is something that they're really grateful for. The next slide. Great. Okay, so just to promote to yourselves, and hopefully you can pass on some messages to anyone it might be relevant to, we've got scholarships for 2020 open now, 2 at postgraduate level, 2 at undergraduate level. Deadline is the 3rd of July to make those applications, and that's how anyone can make some inquiries, but all of the information is on our website, on the Cardiff Met website. If you just search for Sanctuary, it will pop up. And we're receiving inquiries and applications now. The obviously difficult thing at the moment is there's not been a decision made on when the academic year will actually start for the university at the moment. That's currently in discussion, and obviously we would have to adjust our scholarship in line with whatever is decided for the next start point of our academic year. And that's it from me.
Great, thanks so much, Natalie. That's been really great to see how you work things in practice at Cardiff Met. I think one of the really nice things to see about best practice examples is how universities fit things to work in their particular area, and I think the way that you guys are using kind support, because obviously it's an area where there is high dispersal, to not affect asylum support is really fantastic. So thanks for sharing that.
So I'm just going to jump in, Chris, because I think we've got a few questions popping up, but I'm wondering whether, because I know there's a question from James around adding undergraduate scholarships, but I think, Natalie, you're going to be around with us for the breakout groups as well, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe I might just start popping those questions into the breakout group sessions where I think they kind of fit, kind of about adding extra stuff onto existing scholarships, if that's okay, James.
Okay.
Great, and I see there's a question about hate crime as a barrier, and I think that is something I'll raise it now because we may not come back to it, the barriers in later sessions, but I think that's absolutely a very good point, and perhaps an omission from me, in the sense that obviously people who are seeking asylum can face significant barriers in terms of their reception in the UK, and that's always something to consider as well. It often can be battles that people might personally be facing, so thank you for raising that. I'm not sure, I can't see a name.
I think, yeah, and I think Abby's going to get to that in her session later as well.
Great. Okay. Isabel, are you okay to take over from this? I'll keep moving the slides forward if that works for you.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name's Isabel. I'm the Senior Access Officer for Refugees and Asylum Seekers at Birkbeck University, and my role sits within the Access and Engagement team at Birkbeck. Birkbeck launched its Sanctuary Scholarship Programme, which we named the Compass Project, back in 2017, and very much tried to mould it around the Birkbeck model. Do you mind going on to the next slide, please? Brilliant. So there are some things that I guess make us a little bit different in higher education. For example, we are an evening university provider, and we do have a lot of part-time students. One area that we do also really focus on are being able to offer a range of entry routes into university. So for example, access courses. These are particularly good for students perhaps without conventional qualifications, or maybe students with no qualifications, or for students who have actually been out of education for a number of years. So with that in mind, we launched Compass, and Birkbeck opted to offer a range of entry routes, basically in the form of higher education certificates, perhaps foundation years, and these are offered for both undergraduate and postgraduate courses, and we do have a limited number of master degrees that we also offer as well. So we have 20 scholarships in total, and these are offered on a yearly basis. These scholarships are only for people, for students who are not eligible for student finance, so asylum seekers or perhaps those with limited leave to remain. But the rest of our activities are open to all students who have refugee status and who would like advice in accessing university. Next slide, please, Chris. Okay, brilliant. So the Compass Project, one of the real aims of the project is to offer a unique and positive experience for all of the scholars who come to Birkbeck through it. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how we've been able to do that, and in some way this has been due to the buy-in that we have got from the different departments and from senior management. So this is from setting it up, but also the sort of continued support that we do get from them. A lot of work went into informing Birkbeck staff about Compass when it was first created, and also what they could do to support the project throughout the year, and also what they could do to support the students. So one example that comes to mind is that we have an academic mentoring program, and we ask basically all of the departments and academic staff to volunteer their time to mentor students that come through on the project. We also always are looking to encourage collaboration between different departments, so the bursaries office, registry, student support, and we have a Compass committee group made up of representatives from these areas of the college. This is to really ensure that there is better advocacy and better support for the students throughout the year. It's also been really important to take the time to explain the project to academic staff. We've found their support has been hugely beneficial in setting up the project, but also as the project's developed. They can help to develop the project as well as be advocates for the students. Next slide, please, Chris. Okay, brilliant. So I haven't really gone into the huge details about the particulars about what we do offer, but just very generally, we're going into the 4th year of recruitment and the 4th year of the project from the new academic year, and so far we've supported 56 students through the Compass project. So we do have a number of initiatives to offer tailored advice for students. So this is from pre-entry, on course, and also we are developing an alumni network, and we're encouraging campus students to come back to Birkbeck and to share their experiences with current students, but also prospective students. We also work with our local community partners, and this has been really, really key to building up our knowledge base, but also building up our network and being able to connect to different communities, particularly around London. In usual times, we would do this through offering taster days, and this really gives an opportunity for students to come into university, see what it's like, meet current students, and also to hear about support that's available to them. At the moment, we've tried to replace this with online workbooks, video tutorials, and also telephone clinics. So that's basically me coaching through the steps that are involved in making an application to the scholarship. Okay, so just a final note from me really to say that we're really, really proud of the model that we've created at Birkbeck, but that we're always looking to review what we have on offer, and keeping the students involved in this has been really, really key. So I'm always seeking advice from our current campus scholars, asking them particular things on, you know, changes to the programme, things like that, and always seeking their feedback. And I think it's really important to highlight that we couldn't really do it without the students and their feedback and their support really. Brilliant. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, I think there'll be time a little later to go over those, but please feel free to email me after the session as well.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Isabel. That was really, really great to see. And I've gone and help out with the steering group for the campus project. And yeah, it's fantastic to see how supportive academic staff are and what a difference that makes at Birkbeck as well. So thank you for that. So before we move into kind of more detailed discussions in breakout rooms, I'm going to just go over firstly some kind of tips from the people we're actually trying to help, who we work with at STAR, and then I'm going to go quickly over some areas which might be useful discussions in breakout rooms, and then we'll move to kind of more detailed and smaller discussions very shortly. But first, I wanted to kind of make sure that we also consider the opinions, as Isabel mentioned, of the people we're supporting here. And STAR has a group of activists who themselves are either scholars or former scholars who have wanted to continue their campaigning work with STAR, and they're our Equal Access Activist Group, which is, and I messaged them before the event and said, are there any kind of key things that you think we should include in this? Because unfortunately they couldn't make today. But I think these are kind of key quotes that came out in making sure that scholars should have the opportunity to meet with staff. And I think that's something which came up in both Cardiff Met and Birkbeck, is making sure there are dedicated staff around for scholars, making sure that they have the chance to meet other scholars when they start university, making sure that the access and services are signposted really clearly, making sure that scholars kind of are as we said before, in contact with someone who is their kind of named supporter outside of an academic sense. I think guidance on how to apply can be really helpful, and I think that's something which Birkbeck certainly have done a lot of work on in terms of their support, their kind of taster sessions, which I've gone to work on. And then kind of understanding the role of academic supervisors and course structures as well, which can be quite confusing, at least to begin with. I think as well, people have definitely raised, and I know it can be very difficult and a lot of people do ask for it, but I think where possible, I think giving some feedback on applications can be really helpful, because I know a lot of people who do apply for programs will apply perhaps one year, not get it that year, and apply the following one. I think getting some sort of feedback, even if it's very small, I think can be helpful in terms of understanding where people are going wrong, how they can improve their applications next time around. So obviously I know it's something which can be very difficult for universities because of the volume of applications, but it's certainly something to think about, because I think it's something which was raised quite strongly in the group as well. So that's just to kind of ground our thinking, and again, our group kind of feeds into a lot of the kind of policy and kind of decisions that we make as a campaign and what we work on. So I'm sure you will have seen them in various videos and outputs that we've done as well. So I'm going to just go into these kind of 4 topics about eligibility, recruitment, supporting students and adapting to contexts, and in a little bit here in the next few slides, but do raise other topics in the breakout groups and do ask questions. We really want it to be a very open discussion that, you know, universities with experience can help those who are looking to develop programs, and not just kind of listening to us answer your questions. So do think about what questions you might have for the breakouts shortly. In terms of eligibility, I'm just going to go kind of a very quick kind of 101 in the sense that it does differ across scholarship programs and universities. You know, there's 75 different universities and each of them run their own programs and have their own methods in terms of admissions. The majority target those who can't access student finance, but some do extend this to refugee students. It's also worth mentioning that some look to support young migrants who are struggling to regularize their status. Excuse the misuse of regularize their status, and these may not be people who are in an asylum claim, but they might also have difficulty in accessing student finance. And while we're not discussing that issue kind of in detail here, it's really worth highlighting because these people can be in really difficult situations as well. If you are interested in looking at that area, I'd advise you to go and speak to our friends over at We Belong, which is a group of a charity that's recently launched from Just for Kids Law as a break-off charity of young migrants supporting themselves to access higher education. So do take a look at their work and do kind of think about them as well. So at STAR, we tend to focus on those within the UK. And I think our kind of suggestion is that universities should keep a broad criteria, but have a hierarchy of needs within their status. So if it was if an eligibility requirement was open to people who have refugee status, who have DLR, humanitarian protection, or asylum seeker status, and of course all the dependents as well. But then give a priority of who gets the scholarship program to those who can't access student finance, and consider within your kind of criteria what your hierarchy is in terms of there. And I think some universities as well have got a system where if someone who has got access to student finance gets the scholarship isn't the entirety of their fees, but might give them a top up to cover additional maintenance costs. So yeah, it's worth considering because it can help scholarships go further and last longer as well if you're able to tailor the funding that's given to the context of recipients as well. So I think things to consider in that kind of hierarchy are the length of delay in education, to consider kind of previous academic experience, not necessarily academic merit. I don't think that necessarily should be a consideration, but obviously universities choose how they do that. And also access to finance as well being a kind of key one there. Thinking about recruitment, I've kind of divided this into challenges and tips and good practice. Key challenges in recruitment, I'm sure many of you already know this, are qualification recognition and thinking about how you can kind of test if someone hasn't got evidence of their previous their previous education or insufficient evidence. So thinking about if you can offer some sort of like actual testing program that can do that, or if you can get some kind of reference from a former tutor or some kind of proof that might be a conventional proof but can kind of satisfy you that what they're saying is true. I think a key issue in recruitment is the two-step process. The fact that people have to go through UCAS and then apply to scholarship applications. It can leave people caught in the middle and unsure whether to confirm a scholarship or confirm a place at which university, and that can be difficult and can delay things. That can be a real problem, and it's certainly something worth discussing. I think that having an awareness of the funding and right to study and their right to study can be an issue as well in recruitment. As we said earlier, it is a complex and changing area of law. I think having no experience or support with UK application process, there's also the issue around deadlines, whether they're too early, whether they're too late. And again, I think that's not necessarily the fault of any university, but more just the fact that there are so many different scholarships and the fact they're not centrally coordinated. In some ways is fantastic because it means we've got a very resilient sector, a sector which has a really broad range that covers a lot of different individuals. But at the same time, it can lead to disparities in terms of when deadlines are, and that can cause some problems as well. And then promotion and outreach, which I know a lot of universities do some fantastic work in, and hopefully we can all learn from those here as well. I think good practice, if you are going to do any kind of interview or any kind of discussion, make sure it's really informal and really light. Maybe a quick phone chat. Trying to avoid anything that's reminiscent of any kind of asylum interview is obviously key there. Avoiding asking details about their asylum claim in any kind of form or application process. Don't ask people to kind of sell their story. I think it's more about asking what people plan to do with their access to higher education. Thinking about looking ahead. I think ultimately the details of an asylum claim are probably between them and the Home Office, but I think it's, if possible, asking people not to bring up traumatic experiences is definitely good practice there. Making sure application forms are available to download. I think this is something that only came up recently actually, but I think it's something which is good practice, especially at the moment when people may not necessarily have access to internet. They might not be able to access things in the same way, especially now universities are currently closed or schools are closed. Just having the option to be able for someone to be able to print out a form, give it to someone, and they can fill it in and send it to you is obviously can be an access issue, and especially with this group, there can be people who can't access the internet to be able to fill out forms. So it's something to consider. Flexible in English language, I think using alternative testing, not necessarily IELTS, can be a way around that. And I think some universities have actually developed their own programs of English language testing, which has been really good practice and has worked very well. I think this has been shown into really quite sharp relief lately, because obviously now IELTS tests and IELTS centres are closed. Universities are looking to kind of work out how they can be more flexible in English language. And I know a university in London is actually it's accepting Duolingo level for some postgraduate courses. And that's just something to kind of think about in terms of, are there other ways of proving language competency, especially for this group, if they can't access IELTS testing. So something to consider. We've heard already about birth breaks, taste stains and phone chats. And I think promoting in local charities and schools can be really good. And I know there's several scholarship programs that don't advertise nationally, but advertise in the local area because they know their area has a lot of dispersal or might have a high resettlement area, kind of resettlement rate in the area. So I think looking at your local context is really important too. Supporting students, I think it's something which came up a lot in discussions with our activist group. Keeping anonymity on campus as much as possible. So obviously I think where it's an issue of actual safeguarding, making sure that people, that's important, and members of staff might have to know about individuals' status in terms of like topics or kind of in terms of supporting them academically if they are having problems elsewhere. But otherwise not naming them as some particular type of scholar and having kind of open kind of discussions about that is probably good, because I think university is a space where people can restart completely, and I think giving people the space to do that is really good too. Having a name contact is a really important part we've heard of from both Natalie and Isabel, and having those regular pastoral and academic check-ins as well. Signposting is absolutely key, making sure people understand the services they have access to, and these are really clearly earmarked. Access to any kind of orientation and support, and I think in many cases universities already do this for international students. So I think if you can kind of lobby international student departments and the university to open up spaces on any kind of international student orientation for refugee students or people from refugee backgrounds who are coming into the university, that can be a really great way of using an existing system to make students more welcome as they come in onto scholarships too. Offering opportunity to meet other scholars if they want to is really important, and working with tutors and lecturers to be flexible because of circumstances too. And it goes without saying, as universities give to all students access to counselling and mental health support as well. I think finally I've included this perhaps slightly vague title because I think it's worth considering this, especially now, and I think hopefully we'll hear a lot of great practice in the breakout groups of how universities currently are adapting to contexts in the kind of response to the COVID-19 pandemic. But I think putting that aside for a moment, there's also the understanding of locally specific adaptation, thinking about programs that suit particular areas, and that might be taking into consideration things about whether it's a dispersal area, whether there's refugee resettlement programs, whether you can work with local charities to do your recruitment, or whether you think you have to recruit from further afield, and in which case you might think about actually providing full maintenance support as well. Thinking about funding for programs, and so universities which have a particularly active alumni network might think about adapting their alumni asks to support this program. I know that's something the University of York has done to great success, and others too. Thinking about asylum support and accommodation, whether you want the scholarship, whether the scholarship funding will impact on asylum support in terms of if you give scholars cash bursaries, will that then knock them off their weekly asylum support? Is the trade-off enough for them to live off? Considering those can be really important. And thinking about any kind of innovative funding, so whether that's extra support for potential costs like childcare. I know some universities, if they don't fill a scholarship place 1 year, they've managed to kind of negotiate with their funder that they can keep some money aside in case of kind of next year that someone might come with need for childcare costs, because of course someone who's still seeking asylum wouldn't have access to the public funds available to support with childcare. So there's something to consider as well. As we've seen at Cardiff Met, providing support in kind and also working with student groups as well can be a really great way of kind of perhaps promoting scholarships too, and we definitely encourage star groups to support promotion, and that's something which I think Bristol has done a lot of work on. I've included recruitment partnerships here because I think it's something we're going to come onto at the end when we talk about working regionally, but certainly thinking about if one scholarship is particularly oversubscribed but still has potentially good candidates, speaking to universities elsewhere in that region about whether they are over or undersubscribed could be a way forward. It's a longer term thing, but definitely something to worth thinking about. So that leads us into the breakout. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, I think,